It's still here. The last week, I set the stage. Last week, whenever a new year starts, I have to sort of bring you into our world. And currently, the world we're in is the world of Siddur. So he did a lot of stuff. I explained to you the idea that davening is a journey, is a joining together of different things to create a ladder. And I explained to you that the point in the Siddur where we're holding, which is Baruch She'amar, Baruch She'amar, is the transition from the first level to the second level. It's 4 words: Asiya, Yetzira, Bria, Atzilus. Till Baruch She'amar is Asiya. From Baruch She'amar to Yishtabach is Yetzira. Birchas Kishmet is Bria, and Shmiras is Atzilus. Last week, I actually took out the Siddur and I showed you where this is in the pages. I'm not reviewing that again. I just want to tell you that the Zohar says this. The Zohar says this. And the Zohar calls it the 4 tikkunim, the 4 corrections. The word tikkun can mean correction, and the word tikkun can also mean clothes or jewelry. He says the first correction is correction of self. The second correction is correction of this world. The third correction is the correction of the higher worlds. And the fourth correction is the correction of God's name. And those 4 things, correction of self, correction of this world, correction of the higher world, of the angels, and the correction of God's name is the same thing as Asiya, Yetzira, Bria, and Atzilus. And I'm going to talk about this in a moment. The Zohar is one of the earliest sources for this bracha of Baruch She'amar, as I'm going to tell you momentarily. So I'm doing a journey through the Siddur that I don't review every year. I'm going to continue to move. So the girls get on at a certain point, and they get off at a certain point. You get a piece of it. All the classes are posted, edited and posted, so of course you're welcome to go and listen to them. It's probably hundreds of classes. By this point, I can't even imagine how much it is. On Siddur,
Where are they posted?
I'm not going to tell you. You don't know about my website. You should be punished.
There's WhatsApp chat.
Inside Hasidus, we were cleaning the pizza,
No.
and we found like some of these cards
Yeah.
as bookmarks within the bookshelves. And guys like inside Hasidus, well, like Rabbi paltiel.
Yes, inside Chassid, that's me.
Also, there's lots of chat where you get links for all the videos from TikTok, Instagram, Facebook.
Who sends them to you?
You forget to smash that like button. It's also about like featuring of WhatsApp, and it's like posting every day few links from the different
Like short real.
The short classes or the full classes?
and full as well.
Okay, I don't. I send just my new classes. If you're in my group, I send you the new classes. David, there's a bunch of people doing things for me, Baruch Hashem. So I don't even know who's doing what. In fact, I don't even know what's going on. I just know that. I hope it's good. Okay, so the point that the journey that we're in is transitioning from the physical world to the spiritual world, to the metaphysical world, which is called, instead of correcting yourself, no. I take that back. You're journeying from focusing on yourself to focusing on this world, the correction of this world. This is connected to Psukei D'Zimra, to the section of davening which we're beginning, which is thanking Hashem for the things that Hashem does for us. As I explained to you last week, there are 3 or 4 different exercises, 3 or 4 different things that a Jew is supposed to do each day, that at least in theory, once upon a time were separate things. Every day you have to daven. Every day you have to say Shema. Every day you have to praise Hashem. Every day you have to thank Hashem. And at some point, and it's hard to know how much time there was between when these ideas were initiated and when the links were made, they were put together to create this ladder. So we're holding in the beginning of the second rung of the ladder. This second rung of the ladder, which is called Psukei D'Zimra, songs of Zemer, passages of song. Psukei D'Zimra, passages of song. Now, I just want to explain that there's many Hebrew words that denote singing, right? There's shir, there's nigun, there's miris, and there are many words that denote to sing, right? There's many words that denote to praise, and there's many words in Hebrew, and many words in Hebrew that can connote that mean singing. And if you have more than one Hebrew word that means the same thing, there's got to be a difference between one and the other. So there's shir and there's miris, and there's nigun, and there's other things as well. But there's discussions. What's the difference between a shir, which is the Hebrew word for song, and a zemer, which is the Hebrew word for song? So this is the way it's explained, that shir means to sing with your mouth. And zemira, means to sing with an instrument. And Kabbalistically, the difference between shir, which is to sing with your mouth, and zemira, which is to sing with an instrument, is like the difference between oir and keli, the light and the vessels. Shir, singing with your mouth, is like the light, and zemer, singing with a vessel, is like the vessels, like the keli. The argument is as follows, and this is a very, very difficult argument to make practically, but it's a very easy argument to make philosophically. Can a musical instrument be as sensitive as the human voice? Can a musical instrument speak with the same nuance that a human being who's singing can speak?
If it's a good musician.
Okay, so it's not just if it's a good musician, it has to be if it's a good instrument. Now, this is a philosophical argument. You're obviously involved in music, right?
Yeah.
Disagree after I finish. Okay, let me first say what I'm going to say and tell me why I'm wrong. The argument is, and I'm saying this really on my own, as a philosophical argument, a human being's nuance, human being's ability to have differences is infinite. We're alive, we're living. A machine, and when you say the word machine, you mean a mechanical entity, not necessarily an electromagnetic entity. Anything that people create to help them can be perfect only to a limited degree. For example, a ruler. You have rulers that can measure feet. You have rulers that can measure inches. You have rulers that can measure millimeters. You have rulers that can measure a millionth or a billionth of a millimeter. But there's no ruler that can measure with an exactitude that's infinite. Everything has a finitude, there's a limit. The human being, in as much as he or she is organic, doesn't have any limits. So my argument is that the human voice can have a preciseness, can have a life that the best musician playing on the best instrument can reproduce in a measure. The problem with the human voice is that we get tired. The problem with the human voice is that there is the realities of the physical person. In other words, can you sing for 6 hours as well as you can play the violin? I don't think it's humanly possible. The human voice is not going to hold it. So the human being has other limitations. But in terms of what a person is by himself versus what a person is when he uses tools, we all use tools. Our tools are very important. The tools that we use help us. They make our lives more efficient. But just like tools help us, tools also limit us, because the tool cannot help us more than the tool is precise. And there's no such thing as an infinitely precise tool. There is such a thing as an infinitely precise living being, at least in theory. So the argument is, shir is the human voice singing. Mizmed is the human being using an instrument to sing. Now, a lot of people would say, including me, that musical instruments can, first of all, they can reproduce almost any sound with great exactitude. And second of all, they're far more controllable. It's a lot easier to manage a violin than to manage a person for 1,001 reasons. Not that it's easy to manage a violin, but to manage a chazan is far more difficult. But the opposite is also true. As much as tools help us, there's a point at which a tool can't help us anymore. Or to say it in fancy, there's a point at which we have to stop using our tools and we have to start using our own wits, because when we get to the most fine and precise aspects of what makes us us, we can't reproduce it with a machine, with a tool. We have to do it ourselves. So tools help us. But by definition, the help that a tool is going to provide has to be limited. So in Hebrew, the word shir means to sing with your mouth. Zemer means to sing with an instrument. And by the way, I learned 3 prakim a day in Rambam, so you girls, some of you at least, are studying Sefer HaMitzvahs, so you're more or less where I am. So yesterday we started Pili HaMikdashim, which is exercise in exhaustion. The next 6 days are Rambam speaking very hard. It's very difficult halachas, but we're learning karbonis. It was very nice the last couple of weeks. Beis Hamikdash and karbonis, it's all beautiful stuff. And one of the things that the Rambam talked about the last couple of days or weeks is the fact in the Beis Hamikdash they would sing. And it was a special mitzvah to sing on the carbon. But he says there's 2 parts to the singing. One is singing with your mouth, and the other is singing with an instrument. And he makes it very clear that the mitzvah of singing is with your mouth, dafka. The instruments that were used in the Beis Hamikdash were a lower level. They were a secondary thing. In addition to singing with the mouth, they also played instruments. But the primary concept of shir in the Beis Hamikdash, the idea that whenever you have a carbon, which is one of joy, as opposed to one of sin offering and so forth, you have to sing when you bring the carbon. It means the peh with your mouth, because it's a finer tool of expressing whatever emotions one is expressing towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu when you sing than when you do it with a musical instrument. Now disagree. Okay, good. I'm just telling you, I remember your name.
Fine and cool is interesting.
No, it's the mouth. It's a tool that is very helpful, but its exactitude will ultimately be finite. So now, the second section of davening is not called Psuke Shir, it's called Psuke Zemer. It's called passages of song, but we don't use the more precise term for singing, which means singing with your mouth, Psuke Shir. There's a medrash, there's a medrash called Perek Shira. It's a very interesting medrash. It's a whole medrash which quotes Psukim from Tanakh that all the animals sing. It lists maybe 40 or 50 animals, and each animal has their own song. It's called Perek Shira. There is such a thing as Perek Shir. But in the morning, we don't call it Perek Shir or Psuke Shir, we call it Psuke Zemer. We call it Psuke Zemer, which means that when you're holding in the second stage of davening, there's a presumption that it's not perfect. You're calling it zemer because you're connoting your intent on indicating that although I'm going out of a level where I'm simply acknowledging Hashem to a level where I'm praising Hashem, I'm celebrating Hashem, and really what Psuke is celebrating Hashem for the things that Hashem does for me. What have you done for me lately? That's Psuke Zemer. What have you done for me lately? But the singing that accompanies this exercise in acknowledging all the wonderful things that Hashem does for us is called zemer, to connote that as beautiful as it is, it's not perfect, it's not exact. Because we're using a tool. We're using something which cannot hold exactitude more than to a certain measure. That's what's called Psuke Zemer rather than Psuke Shir. And in Hasidus, there's another idea which is mentioned at length. It's a big deal in Hasidus. Okay, and that is that in Hebrew, the word zemer, which means to sing, also means to prune. To prune. Pruning means that if you have a field or a garden, and you have weeds or undesirable growth. So you go in with your gloves, you have to wear the gloves and the knee pads, and then maybe the mask if you're very religious, and you cut them off. Zimor means to cut away undesirable things, to get them out. Sometimes what you're doing is cutting out weeds, and sometimes you're doing actually cutting leaves and branches. I know nothing about that thing, but I do know this. That sometimes you have a plant, right? And whatever that plant is, maybe that plant produces tomatoes, that plant produces peppers, but that plant is just meant to be pretty and sitting in your front garden. If there are too many leaves, the plant is going to suffocate itself. So part of pruning is not just that you're going to cut out the parasites and the weeds and the bad stuff. You'll actually cut this leaf so that leaf should grow. You'll cut this tomato, so that other tomato have enough room to fully mature. It's called zimur, the cutting away to make things more beautiful. So psuke de zimra, we choose the word zmiris rather than the word shir, even though the word shir is far more precise, and the word zimr connotes a less exactitude. First of all, because psuke de zimra is not perfect, and second of all, because psuke de zimra has an undercurrent. And the other current is that while you're creating something beautiful, you're also simultaneously getting rid of something which is undesirable. It is a pasuk in Tanakh which says lezamer aritzim. Lezamer means to cut away. Aritzim means sinners. There's a concept brought in Chassidus that while we're singing Psukei de Zimra, we're also killing the Yetzer Hara, or we're quieting the Yetzer Hara, and it's called Psukei de Zimra rather than Psukei Shir to indicate this duality. We're singing praise to Hashem, but we're singing praise to Hashem on a level that as we sing this praise to Hashem, the other guy that wants us to go do Narishkeiten is being cut down. That's the other side of the idea of Psukei de Zimra. Okay? What's the concept? What's the concept? And this is something which I also discussed last year, so we'll review it also quickly. The concept is that when a person davens, person prays, and we know already that although davening has a simple definition, we have created a very long time ago, probably more than 2,000 years ago, a very complicated structure to a davening, a dynamic structure of davening, where we're climbing a ladder from level to level. One of the things that we're trying to achieve in our davening is to daven with all of ourselves, not with a half of ourselves. All of us know that we have a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Hara, a Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Bahamut. There's a good inclination and bad inclination, a divine soul and an animal soul. It is possible for a person to open up a siddur and to talk to the Eibishter, and the Nefesh Bahamut and the Yetzer Hara are sleeping. They're waiting for you to finish, and when you finish davening, they're going to be refreshed. They're ready to fight again. When we daven, we don't want that to happen. We want to fight. The time that you want to fight with the Yetzer Hara is when you choose the terrain, time, and place. You know, that everyone spoke about the difference between offensive war and defensive war. Defensive war has its strengths. It's called trench warfare. And offensive war, I hate to use this expression in the classroom, but that's what it is. It's called blitzkrieg. The difference in offensive war and defensive war, this is the First World War and the Second World War, is that when you fight a defensive war, the enemy chooses the time and the place of the battle. They decide where they were going to attack and when they were going to attack. When you choose offensive war, you get to choose the time and place of the battle. So when do you want to fight with the Yetzer Hara? When you're weak, when you're in a very materialistic environment that belongs to him. You want to fight the Yetzer Hara when you have the maximum advantage. In the middle of davening, that's when you want to fight with. Now, I want to daven, the Yetzer Hara is bothering me. So the whole process of davening involves steps. And one of those steps, or two of those steps, or in some way, each and all of those steps is not just connecting to the Eibishter with the divine soul, but it's schlepping the Yetzer Hara and the Nefesh Bahamut along. And how do you do it? It's the whole process. The whole process. And the Rabbi Chassidus, they talk you through the different rungs, the different steps of davening as it applies to the Yetzer Hara. The first thing you do is you punch him in the nose. You tell him, I think you're an idiot, which is, of course, wonderfully useless. But you put, yeah, the Lashon of the Maimorim, you give him a zetz. You tell the Nefesh Bahamut, tell the animal soul, you're wrong, and that the truth is that we have to have a relationship with the Eibishter. That, given the Yetzer Hara zetz by itself, is not effective. It's a first step. And it's the first rung of davening. The first rung of davening, which is the Yom Moedanisa Vision Hashem, in relationship with the Yetzer Hara, it's a punch in the nose. The second set of davening is much more Yetzer Hara. What's the word? friendly. Wait, why? Because the second part of davening, of the four parts, is by definition emotional. When you say psukim, the zimus as nalacha, you're supposed to sing the psukim out loud, more than the parts before and more than the parts after. You say Shemini, you're supposed to be completely quiet. Completely quiet. When you say Shema, you're supposed to be meditative and thoughtful. So you're also going to be quiet. Psukim, the zim is the time of passion, and that's the chap. Passion is the language of the animal soul. The Yetzer Hara's language is the language of emotion. So this is the concept of Psukim Dezimra. As we are singing and praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we have to assume that we're doing it emotionally, we're not just saying the words with a coldness and with an indifference and with a distance. We're doing it in a very powerful and a very, very emotional way. We are simultaneously quieting the animal soul because we're speaking his language. And he's got two choices: to resist or to sing along. And if you're excited enough about the Eibishter, he has no choice but to get excited as well. And when you come to the Yetzer Hara, and you say to the Yetzer Hara, I want you to get excited about the Eibishter, and the Yetzer Hara says to you, I'm not interested. The Yetzer Hara doesn't say you're wrong. If you say you're wrong, you can argue with it. Yetzer Hara says, like my daughter told me yesterday about my class in Besifka, boring. Why did God give us children? To tell us the truth. And then some boring. Not anything else. Okay. Boring. When you come to the Yetzer Hara, you tell the Avish, he doesn't say I disagree, I'm angry. That would be okay. He's boring. I'm knitting to the sun. No interest whatsoever. I have this story that I tell. I heard this as a boy from one of my mashpiyim about the giraffe. It's very tall, neck, and it eats with its head up. It's having a conversation with the goat. Eats with its head down. And the giraffe is trying to describe to the goat how rich its world is. It sees the sky and the clouds and the mountains. So beautiful. And the goat says to the giraffe, but you can't eat the sky, right? You can't eat it. No, but it's a whole different experience. You can see it. So the giraffe and this goat are having this conversation. The giraffe is explaining to the goat that there's more to life than eating food. There's beautiful things to see, there's beautiful smells to smell. And the goat is saying, I can't eat it. So they argue for a long time, and finally the giraffe convinces the goat that it should break its neck and raise up its head and look at the beautiful sky. So the goat is Moshe Nefesh, it breaks its neck and raises its head up to the sky and looks at the beautiful sky and the mountains and the trees and the little streams of water that are cascading down the mountain and joining into larger and larger streams to become a raging river at the bottom. And says to the giraffe, but I can't eat it. And this is the Nefesh Bahama. It's something that the giraffe doesn't understand. I'm not interested. I'm not interested. So you have to speak to the animal soul in davening in a way that gets its interest. So you don't talk about God, you talk about food. You don't talk about God, you talk about safety and shelter and peace. You speak to the animal soul about the things that interest the animal soul. And you know where these things came from God. You're praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but you're praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu about things that the animal soul enjoys. And you're praising the animal soul about things the animal soul enjoys, so that the animal soul should sing along. And that's why it's called Zemer and not Shir. So if you're singing not only with the neshama, when the neshama sings, he sings very, very quietly and touchfully. You're singing loud and passionately with the animal soul. The animal soul is made to love God, not because the animal soul cares about God, but because the animal soul cares about the princess. The animal soul itself. And you're teaching the animal soul that being excited about the Eibishter is in his or her or its best interest. That's the pshat. That's a concept. Sure, we sing songs that praise Hashem on a level that it's not exact, but it speaks the language of the animal soul. In other words, it's meant to be done in an excited and an emotional way, so that the animal soul should sing along. And of course, the idea is that eventually the animal soul is going to be put in this place enough that you'll be able to talk reason to the animal soul. And that would be the third rung of the davening, which is the Shema and Yitzburah. Okay, go ahead. What's your question or comment?
What does it mean to punch to the Yetzer Hara?
To punch Yetzer Hara means you tell him you're not going to listen to him. Without a negotiation, without a discussion, without an explanation, that's not going to listen to you. Now the punch is made on you. The punch is the first rung of davening. The way I like to define it is the first rung of davening is a simple statement. There is a God. Now, why is that a punch of the Yetzer Hara? Because you're not arguing it, you're not proving it, you're not explaining it, you're just accepting it. So the Nefesh HaBahamis says, excuse me, what's the proof? Tell the Yetzer Hara, don't speak, no one talk to you, no one talks to you, don't back. Little kid is supposed to be seen and not heard. What about the cliche? You understand? That's why it's a punch. You follow? The second rung of davening, you're actually talking to her. You're speaking about emotion and the level that he or she or it relates to. The first rung, you tell the Nefesh HaBahamis, you tell yourself, there is a God. Any other questions or comments? Moiden. Yeah, sorry for the accent. Go ahead.
Just to clarify your statement, what would we say, Sukkot Zimra is the fact that we're seeing along with the Yetzer Hara, the animal souls? Is that like what makes it the rule?
The reason for the choice word zemer is not because it's a tool. It's because it's not perfect. And because while we're singing, we're also killing, cutting off. But the alternative meaning of the word zemer, in addition to mean to sing, means to prune.
Not perfect because of the most.
It's not perfect because it's external emotions, right? It's not because it's good, because it's right. Good. And these Psukkah de Zimra have a bracha before and have a bracha after. The Psukkah de Zimra have a bracha before and have a bracha after. And this leads to a fascinating controversy. It leads to a fascinating controversy. And I may have touched on this last week, but I'm touching on it again. I'm moving from point A to point B. I'm slowly but surely bringing us back to where we were holding it in the last year, and then we're going to proceed with learning this year's material.
Say that the tool that we are using now is the like relationship that we're trying to have with our Yetzer Hara, like the conversation that we're trying to have with the Yetzer Hara, like it's still finite. So like we want to do that as like for the governing, but it's cool.
Okay. We could say that. It's more or less what she asked. I'm saying you don't need to say that. You simply have to say that it's not perfect. Okay, so listen to me. If you want to go in that route, I would add one word what you just said. The tool that we're using is passion. But pronounced passion, not deep and quiet passion, noisy and in-your-face passion. And that's by definition inexact. I don't think there's even a question about it. I don't think you would disagree with me. The controversy is, and as I explained to you last week, we do not make up brachas, period. All the blessings we say in davening, in benching, in the morning, on special occasions, for special events, were made by the people who wrote this siddur originally, the Anshe Kes HaGadol, the members of the Great Assembly. So this section, which is called Psukkah de Zimra, has a bracha before and a bracha after. The bracha before is called Baruch Sha'amad, which is what we're studying, and the bracha after is called Yishtabach, which we'll get to Tafshin Peites, or Tafshin Sadakala, Tafshin Sadakei, whatever time it takes. The Mitzvah Hashem, the Vedic Shamim Parasat. Der Brie ist an der Chayim, voll und gesund. These brachas are no place in the Gemara. The bracha before Shema of Psukkah de Zimra, and the bracha after Psukkah de Zimra, which is Baruch Sha'amad Yishtabach, we don't have a good source for it. We do not have a good source for it. Okay. I am falling asleep. I'm going to get myself coffee. I'll be back. Take a second. I don't like to sleep on a book. I know how to do it, but I don't like to.
What about the book? Famous? No. Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow, I saw her name written on it, you know, like, when did she get it? When she's getting married.
All right. You're not allowed to make a bracha on this. This is pure poison. Here I go making a bracha.
How do you take your coffee?
This is a centimeter of powder and a half a cup of water, and that's it. Poison. But it wakes me up. It works. Okay, I'm always falling asleep. So the rule that we don't make a brachas. I just talk about this a lot. The siddur keeps growing, but you don't make up a bracha. Now, what makes a bracha a bracha? In the Yeshivish language, in the Talmudic language, a bracha is a bracha if it had Shem u'malchus. Shem means Hashem's name, and malchus means we call him the king of the world. So anytime it says Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam, it's a bracha. I just made a shahakal on this coffee. A Rav will tell me I can't make a bracha on it because it's not food, but I did anyway. What makes it a bracha? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam. The Shmoyne Esrei, the 19 brachas of Shmoyne Esrei we say each day are brachas because they have Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech ha'olam in the beginning and the end. Now in Shmoyne Esrei, the brachas Ketores, we say Baruch atah Hashem. Goyal Yisrael, Baruch atah Hashem. They don't actually say melech ha'olam. But as a rule, a bracha needs Shem u'malchus. It needs Hashem's name and calling Hashem the king of the world. It makes the bracha a bracha. So rabbis may have made up prayers, and believe me, rabbis have. If you would collect all the tefillahs paid by all the rabbis, more than a schos, it's huge. I have in my house a siddur, which is, it's frustrating because I don't recognize it. So Rabbi Sadia Gon, it was 1,000 years old, one of the oldest students that we have, a manuscript of. And he's got prayers, pages and pages, I've never heard of. He wasn't Sephardic, he was in Iraq. He was before Sfard, when the Jews were still living in Asia Minor, before they moved to Spain. Sfard means Spain, you understand? There's an enormous number of different prayers. But a bracha, you don't make up. The brachas are made by the Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, and that's it. Nobody else, full stop. And I believe I mentioned this last week, that there is one bracha that we say each day, which we know was not from the Knesset HaGedolah. It was made by the Go'onim. That means it was made about 600 or 700 years after the members of the Great Assembly. And that's the bracha HaNoisein LaYo'ev Koyach. It's one of the morning blessings. HaNoisein LaYo'ev, if you have a siddur, I don't want to spend the time getting you guys out. There I go. I don't want to waste time. Here, just three. No more. Okay. You can share. You can share. You can share. Nice on the okay. It's just one of the morning brachas. It's on page 6. It's on page 6. It's the third from the bottom. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who gives strength to the weary. It's the this bracha was added when people found themselves to be weak. People didn't have so much control over themselves, which is a funny concept. In other words, people used to be strong and now they're weak, and that was 1,800 years ago. So how weak are we? And there's some people who don't say it. As far as I remember, in Ashkenaz doesn't say it. I don't like to use the word misnagdim because I don't think they're misnagdim. Ashkenaz does not say and the reason is simple. If it's not from the Ashkenaz Sagdel, you don't make up new brachas. But the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch raises the question and talks about it at length, and says, no, it's okay. But he's also saying it with a weariness. He's saying it like, don't you try that at home, that kind of thing. There are rare brachas that are not from the Anshe Sagdel, they're made up later, but with those few exceptions, we do not make up our own brachas. Now, Baruch Shalom Yishtabach, every Jew and Jewess says every single day. They're not mentioned in the Gemara. The Torah brings a medrash called Pirkei HaCholos that supposedly mentions Baruch Shalom Yishtabach, but we don't have that sefer. We've never seen the Pirkei HaCholos. The Pirkei HaCholos that the Torah speaks of has not reached us. It's a medrash. We have a medrash called Pirkei HaCholos, but apparently the Torah had a much more elaborate version or a different version of Pirkei HaCholos. The Torah, who really the founder of the Shulchan Aruch as we have it was designed by the Torah. The Torah was the son of the Rosh, Rabbeinu Asher, who was one of the great halakhic authorities in the history of the Jewish people, and he created the design of the Shulchan Aruch that has 4 sections, Erechaim, Yeridei, and Mishpat, as opposed to the Rambam Shulchan Aruch, which has 14 sections. And the Torah writes that the Pirkei HaCholos, that's in other words, in the times of the Chazal. The Zohar had Baruch Shem. The Zohar. The Zohar was also written at the same time, the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara. But there's no mention of Baruch Shalom Yishtabach in the Gemara, which is really, really disturbing. It's upsetting. How could it not be there? And by the way, I've shared with you in the past, you can barely find a reference in the entire Gemara to Kaddish. I taught you Kaddish 2 years ago. 3 years ago, we did about that great life. I spent a whole year teaching Kaddish. By the time I was done with Kaddish, you could say Kaddish and Kaddish. And I have a whole theory about it. But a lot of people get very nervous. The second section of davening, which is has a bracha before, a bracha after, doesn't say anything about it. So there's a big argument about it. First of all, everybody says it. Even the Ashkenazim who don't say the bracha, Baruch Shalom Yishtabach, they say. There's different nuschais. Everybody has their own little version. And if you have the handout that I gave you, if you have this handout, if you turn to the second page, you'll see how many different versions of Baruch Shalom there are. On the top of the page, you have the Rasag. Then you have the Shlomo ben Nissim gone. Then you have the Amram gone. These 3 are before Rashi. That's how old they are. They're before Rashi. Rashi was born in the year 1040. Now we're holding 2024. Almost 1,000 years since the birth of Rashi. These Sfarim, the Rasag and the Shlomo gone and the Amram gone are older than that. And you'll see each one has Baruch Shalom with a slight variation. There's different displays. Some of them are changed a lot, some of them are changed a little. Think about it in these terms. Okay, I think the oldest nusach is the Amram, which would be the 3rd one on this page. The Amram Gon's nusach of Baruch Shalom is half the age of the Siddur. In other words, the Siddur is 2,500 years old. 1,250 years ago he lived. For the first 1,200 years, we do not have a single extant copy of what their Siddur looked like. We don't have a single copy. And there's a good reason why. Not only was there no printing press in those days, for a long time, people held that you're not allowed to write the Siddur down. It was recorded in memory. Until the time that the Mishnah was written. Just that they couldn't write down the Mishnayos, they couldn't write down the Siddur, which is why the typical Jew never davened. The typical Jew went to shul, and some rabbi who knew the Siddur by heart would say, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, and this is he would answer Amen, and that was his bracha. You yaitze davening by answering Amen on somebody else's, which is why we have this tradition of repeating the Shmoneh Esrei. There was a time that the repeating Shmoneh Esrei for the average Jew was his entire prayer, because they couldn't read, they didn't know how to daven. Then when the Mishnah was written, they started writing the Siddur down. So the oldest Siddur that's actually been preserved in manuscript that we have is about 1,200 years old, I think, something like that. So all the different versions. So we all say Baruch Shalom, but we get nervous. Where did this come from? How could it be that something so prominent in our liturgy, in our culture, in our tradition, is not in the Gemara? So there's basically 2 opinions, and basically is a big bad word, as you know, or don't know, you should know. One opinion is that it is from the Anshken Sagadei law, even though it's not in the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't write everything. The Gemara writes law. So for some reason, Baruch Sha'amer, in other words, the people who wrote the Mishnah, wrote the Gemara, were davening, were praying. And when they prayed, they did say Baruch Sha'amer, but they decided that the Talmud doesn't have to address the questions of Baruch Sha'amer. Although there are references, which I discussed with you last year, that do speak to this idea of saying every day, Hallelujah, Hallel B'chol Yom, and so on. So one opinion is the Anshe Kesagadela wrote it, but they didn't bother recording it in the Gemara. Don't let that make you nervous. Okay, how are you supposed to say that expression? Don't let your heart be bothered. And the others say, no, it's not. It's actually made later. And later could mean 50 years after Kesagadela, it could mean 100 years, it could also mean 500 years after Kesagadela. Now, if you follow the Zohar was written at the same time as the Mishnah, a little while ago the Mishnah written down, which means about 500 years after the Anshken Sagadela. In the Zohar, you have the Nusach, some Nusach. So although in the Gemara, a book written at the same time as the Mishnah in the Gemara does have a record of the Baruch Sha'aman. Some people use that as a proof to say that it was actually written by the Anshken Sagadela. The Gemara choose not to include it. And others say, nah, it's very, very old, but it's not Anshken. In other words, it's old enough for the purists to say it. Even Jews who do not want to say Bracha Anesam Yoav Kech, because it's written by the Go'olim, not in the Gemara, the Baruch Shama they say. And the question that's asked about not adding brachas is answered in very creative ways. And one of them is, you're not allowed to make up new brachas, but you are allowed to make up old brachas. What does that mean? One of the brachas of Anshken Sagadela is the bracha of Halal. But the nusach of Halal is Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Asher Kedishanu B'Tzvei Mitzvanu L'Kriyas Halal, or Al Kriyas Halal, whatever the particulars are. Sukkah Dezimri is Halal. It's a different kind of Halal. Halal is Halal, you say, in special occasions. Sukkah Dezimri is Hallelujah, that you say every day. So there are those people who want to argue that the reason they're allowed to make up a new bracha, because it's not a new bracha, it's a variation of an existing bracha. Since there are brachas on halal, and by the way, when you say halal, you also say a bracha before and after, and the bracha after halal finishes, you know how? Melech, Mahulu, Batish Bachis. How does Yishtabach finish? Have you seen it still? Yeah? Look at the bracha after halal. It's on page 38. I'm sorry. Look on page 30, the beginning. Baruch Shama. Baruch Shama finishes with the words Melech B'Hu Batish Bracha. See that? The bracha we're studying. That's how the bracha after Halal finishes. So there's an argument to be made that even if the brachas Baruch Shama and Yishtabach are not, we can say them because it's not a new bracha. It's a variant, a different form of an existing bracha. And then there's other opinions who compare it to other things. There's a bunch of ways of addressing the question. But this is part of the material that we delved into last year, the question of how old Baruch Shama is and why we're saying a bracha, what is not for, and the Sagadel, all kinds of other exciting things like that. Someone had a hand raised. Go ahead, talk loud.
The two opinions you brought, that's just for Baruch Shama or also Yishtabach?
Both. Yeah, I'm assuming that it's the both together equally. Yeah. Go ahead.
This siddur that we have, was Baruch Shama included or not?
Of course. Yeah, it's the third one on this page. This is it. You read it. Baruch Sha'ama V'Haya Ha'elam Baruch Hu Baruch Ha'elam V'Ezem Baruch Ha'ezem V'Chaim Baruch Ha'ezem V'Ezem Baruch V'Racham Alod Baruch V'Racham Aliyas Baruch V'Sham Tzachim L'Reim. All of those words are exactly ours, but then he changes. Baruch Ma'avir Ha'Feilu maybe Oira, which we don't say. Baruch Kel Chai La'ad L'Chaim L'Netzach, which we say in a certain variation. Baruch She'ein L'Fon of Avlo L'Shich L'Maseh Pod Baruch Shechet which we do not say, and then skip the next three lines. Those three words we do not say. But we say befeh, he says befeh. It's very similar to Anus. The oldest known siddur, I think of I'm going, I know, I looked, is before the Psadi Gaon. They're before the Ashi, they're before the Rambam, they're before the Rif. They're a long time ago. From a point of view of halacha, they're a very long time. From a point of view of the Gemara, they're about 500 years after the Talmud was sealed. So this is the controversy about the Baruch, and then comes a third opinion. How can you have two opinions? There's got to be a third opinion. There's a third. The third opinion is fascinating, and this is something that I'm excited about, and I want to share with you. Okay. And the third opinion is a little of this and a little of this, a little salt, a little pepper. How does that work in this case? And this says in Sfarim, I'm not making this up. It says in how. I forgot, maybe it's in Torah even said it. It says in very, very good sources that if you look at Baruch She'amar and Yishtaba, but particularly Baruch She'amar, you see that this is a bracha with the prefix. Before you say the bracha, you say a bunch of stuff. Now, what's a bracha? I told you before, what's a bracha? Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, right? Find it in Baruch She'amar, please. You have your copy. Look inside. Where is Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam? It's not. If you have my page, it's number 10. I didn't number the line. I numbered the sentences. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu is number 10. That means the first 9 numbers of a total of 17 are before the bracha. Baruch She'amar has 2 halves. The first half is a bunch of Baruch. Baruch, 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 Baruch. You just forget to say Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. And finally, halfway through the bracha, you say Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. You see it? Here's what's a mind-blowing idea. We have Sidurim, very old Sidurim, not recent ones, 1,000-year-old and older, that say that during the week, you should not say the first half of Baruch She'amar. You should start with the words Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. The whole first half you say only on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Now, I don't know a Jew alive today who actually follows that custom. Even the Yemenites, who are the most distinctive today in their culture. I told you this. There's really 4 kinds of Jews, honestly. Ashkenazim, Sephardim, Italians, and Yemenites. Now, of course, Ashkenazim are killing each other. We call them Hasidim and Misnagdim, and you name it. But we're really the same. We really are the same. The differences are relatively minor. Italian tradition is very, very distinctive and different. It's such an interesting thing. Italy is the seat of Rome. Rome is the seat of the Vatican. The Vatican was responsible for the expulsion of Jews from every country in Europe. England, France, Germany, the low countries, everything else. The Italians never expelled their Jews. Rome always had Jews. Rome was orchestrating kicking the Jews out of all the countries in Europe, but held on to its own Jews. So the Italian community is uninterrupted. The Jews living under the nose of the Vatican actually live better than the Jews living in France.
Why?
I don't know. It's just the way it is. So they have a culture which is very distinctive. Now, Yemenites are Bachlal in the bottom of the world. Where is Yemen? Is Yemen Asia or Africa? Does anyone even know? Is Yemen Asia or Africa? Simple question. Anybody? Yemen is Asia. It's the very bottom of the Arabian Peninsula. Because they're in longitude very far south. They're very close to the equator. In other words, if you could picture Africa facing upwards, Yemen is to the right of Central Africa. It's lower than Egypt. But it's Asia. It's the bottom of the Arabian. In other words, it's Saudi Arabia. It's like the big country, the gigantic desert. At the bottom of this Arabian desert is Yemen and Oman, 2 little countries. The Jews have been living in Yemen since the times of David HaMelech. That's what they claim. They've been there forever, for thousands of years, and they have a very distinctive tradition with their own liturgy, their own tefillah, their own culture and way of life. They also say Baruch She'amar. But there was a time and place, one second, where a Yid would say half of Baruch She'amar during the week, only the bracha, and only on special occasions would they say the first half. Now I'm going to let you speak in a second, but I want you to understand the dynamism of this. One of the great, this is an aside, but it's interesting to hear. It's also an Igel L'Maisa. It can affect your practical life. One of the interesting questions that comes up is when you're in the middle of davening and the minyan is saying something, when are you supposed to interrupt and for what? You familiar with that? If you're in the middle of Shmoneh Esrei and the minyan is saying Kaddish, you don't answer. If you're in the middle of Shema And the minyan saying Kaddish, you only answer two Kaddishim, Amen Yehesh Merabah, and the Imru Amen, the fifth Amen. Otherwise, you don't answer Amen. Different parts of davening have different rules of hefsek. In all of our Sidurim, on the back page, there's a map of rules. What you interrupt at this point of davening. Now, Psukei de Zimra, the second section of davening, is more lenient about its interruptions than the third part of davening. There is an opinion, and it seems to be the halachic opinion that holds, that the brachos of Psukei de Zimra are as strict as Krichas Krishma and Krishma. In the middle of Psukei de Zimra, we say almost everything. The only thing you don't really answer is Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmei. And the last two amens at the end of Kaddish. When you're holding in the middle of Psukei de Zimra and the Chazan is doing something, you participate. Except you don't say Baruch Hu, Baruch Shmei, and you don't say all the amens after the fifth amen in Kaddish. Otherwise, you answer everything. But there are those who hold that the bracha of Baruch Shama and Yishtabach is more strict. It's like Berachas Krishma. Now the question becomes, where does Baruch Shama start? If you said the words Baruch Shama Ha'olam and someone says Kaddish, you answer on me? The answer is, are you before or after Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam? Because that's where the bracha really begins. The first half of Baruch Shama is not a bracha, it's just Baruchs. It doesn't become a bracha until you're connected to an Atah and Hashem and Elokeinu and Melech Haolam. You see? And the same is true Yishtabach. Page 38. Yeah, look at page 38 quickly. Where does the bracha begin? Where's Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam in Yishtabach? It's 4 lines from the end. You see? 3/5 of Yishtabach are words before the Baruch. The first half of Yishtabach is not a bracha. The first half of Baruch Shama is not a bracha. I've never studied Yishtabach. Baruch Shama, I've learned a little bit. So I don't know whether Yishtabach is the same as Baruch Shama. I truthfully don't know. I think it is. I'm intuitively thinking that, but I never studied it. But so there's opinions that hold that there's a separation between the first half of Baruch Shama and the second half of Baruch Shama, and that the second half of Baruch Shama, that's really a bracha, and that's from Antikin Sasegedela, and the first half is something else. And this separation goes to the extent that there are certain communities, at least in the past, who didn't always say the whole bracha. Shabbos and Yom Tov said the complete bracha, and during the week they said only a half. Now here comes the clincher. There is a tradition, which is brought in many, many svarim, that the prayer Baruch She'amar is based on a note that fell out of the sky. Piska Mishmaya Nas, a note fell out of the heavens and on it was written Baruch She'amar. Now, what does this mean? Does it mean it's actually a physical piece of paper, or is it a mystical idea? Is it a prophetic idea? This is for a different group of people to explore in their own time. But there is this concept, Piska Mishmaya, a petek, a piece of paper.
Explain why it was in the Zohar.
One second. Some people hold that only the first half of Baruch She'amar was on a piece of paper. And that the second half, the Anshe Knesset Sagadela wrote. In other words, I started this little piece of the conversation by saying that there's two opinions. Is Baruch She'amar from Anshe Knesset Sagadela? Some people say yes, and some people say no. And nevertheless, everybody says it, even those who don't say the bracha and then there's a third opinion. The third opinion says it's different the first half and the second half. Part of the difference, the first half and the second half, is there are arguments being made by Gedali Yisrael. I'm not making it up. That the first half of Baruch She'amar, that's not a bracha, that's the piece that fell out of the sky. And the second half, which is the bracha, is rooted in the Anshe Knesset. They wrote it. So when I taught this to you last year, and I spent a whole Wednesday on this, I told you my personal opinion. And this is my personal opinion. If you understand the tradition of Jewish literature, Jewish writing and Jewish prayer, Jewish liturgy, one of the greatest categorizations, one of the greatest distinctions is what we call Torah Shebiksav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Scripture, Tanakh, and the oral tradition, the Mishnah and the Gemara. They're deeply different in their mystical understanding and in their practical evolution. The Tanakh is prophet, it's the word of God that came to us through man or woman. And of course, according to us, the Anshe Knesset Gadol, the same people that wrote the Siddur sealed the Tanakh. There's no more prophets. No more prophets. That's it. There's 24 prophets, and that's it. Not that there's no people of prophecy, but there's no more books of prophecy. Teresh B'Ksav has to be written for a written text. Teresh B'Peh, halachically, is not allowed to be written down altogether. And there's a lot of philosophical and mystical separation between these two styles. The words of God, they're very precise. The words are very holy. The oral Torah, the ideas matter more than the words. How you say it matters less than what you're saying. There's a lot of differences. Here comes an interesting question. Siddur is in which group? Teresh B'Ksav, Teresh B'Peh. Now, to be honest, 70% of the Siddur is Tanakh, is Tillim. So the question falls away. But it's the other 30% that the Anshe Knesset Gadol wrote, the Brachas basically. Are they Teresh B'Ksav or Teresh B'Peh? I have good proofs from the Rebbe's comments based on earlier slaughter that it's on the fence. It can be either or. In certain ways, it's like Teresh B'Ksav, with the advantage of B'Ksav, it's prophetic and there's a lot of light in it. And in certain ways, it's like Teresh B'Peh, which means it has less light, but it has more logic, more order, more intellect, more understanding. And my feeling is that the meaning of this statement, Piska Mishmaya Nachse, that Baruch She'omer is based on a piece of paper that fell out of the sky, is that this is certainly prophetic. Well, you're going to talk about the Siddur and ask yourself the question, does it belong in the Teresh B'Ksav category? Or does it belong, is it part of the scripture? Or is it part of the oral tradition? Is it part of all the things that Torah and Chazal and Chassidus says about Teresh B'Ksav versus what Torah and Chazal and Chassidus says about Teresh B'Peh? The Siddur straddles the fence, but when it says about Baruch She'omer that a paper came out of the sky, I have reasons to argue and to believe that that means that this is for sure Teresh B'Ksav, the rule. Which means this. The second half of Baruch She'omer is a bracha. The bracha is where all the rules apply. You can't change it, you can't add to it. You have to be very precise about it. You know, say bracha in vain, all those other holy stuff. And that is Teresh B'Peh. The first half of Baruch She'omer, which you can change, you can do whatever you want with it, but that is actually prophetic. It's interesting. This is just a personal feeling that I have. And last year I spent a whole Wednesday exploring this with you. This is just a summary of some of the ideas that we learned right last year to segue into the new material we're going to be learning this year with Hashem's help. Okay? So the issue that we have discussed for the last few minutes is this whole question about the bracha. And we have three opinions. One opinion says it's Anshe Knesset Gadol, one opinion it's not, and one opinion says it's a little. And I'm arguing that the part which is not Anshe Knesset Gadol, that's the part that's prophetic. That's like the Teresh B'Ksav. Pitke Mishmaya Nas. These are some of the ideas that we explored last year. Somebody wanted to speak. Someone had their hand raised. I ignored somebody. Go ahead.
As far as that word, they're saying it's almost in the kingdom of God. Not something like reaching the word of the leader.
But it's Sukkot Zimra. Not perfect. As holy as it is, it's not perfect. The singer isn't perfect, the song isn't perfect, and you're fighting with the Yetzer Hara. The later parts of davening, Yetzer Hara has become a sheep. He's cooperating, started to behave. He's sitting in class and listening to the teacher. Now he's fighting with the teacher. Go ahead, talk loud.
I was gonna say that by saying that it was taught, okay, it's gonna seem very basic, like I can get it to say, but just say, what's the basis of saying this is a different way? Does it come from the company?
The question is, first of all,
You give it money, it's a hard material, you know, but the other thing.
first of all, it doesn't matter if it's Anshe Knesset Gadol or not. The sure goes back to the time of the Chazal. Like I said, nobody questioned what you said. Second of all, Sukkot Zimra is in the Gemara. In the Gemara, there's references made to the idea of Sukkot Zimra. If one Gemara says, if you say Hallel every day, you're a terrible Jew. Another Gemara says you're supposed to say Hallel every day. And the reconciliation is the special Hallel, special occasions. which is a house every day, and we understand that to mean Psukkah Dezimra. The question is simply on the brachas, not on the Psukkah Dezimra, the bracha before and the bracha after. That's not in the Gemara. And that's really, really strange. Because if the Psukkah Dezimra themselves are in the Gemara, shouldn't the Gemara tell us the part that they're adding? The Psukkah Dezimra is Tillim. In the Gemara, there's reference to saying Halo B'chol Yom. Yeah, but the brachas, which is what was added later, that's the part that the Gemara should focus on, and there's no mention of it. That's part of the reason it's so controversial. So Psukkah Dezimra is in the Shas, the brachas of Baruch Shamim Shtabach Hadam.
And
It's the prefix and suffix. Psukkah Dezimra opens with a bracha and closes with a bracha. We're talking about those two brachas right now.
My question is, if it fell from the sky, would that explain why it was in the Zohar and not in the Gemara?
No. Why? No. The Zohar is a few hundred years later than this.
Okay.
The Zohar is much later. The Zohar was written at the same time as the Mishnah and the Gemara. There's a lot of parallels between the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Zohar. As much as people like to say that the Zohar was not written at that time, it matches. They're very different styles of presenting material, but they're presenting the same material. The Zohar was not available for a long time. We didn't have it. But if a person is objective and they look at the Zohar, look at the Mishnah and the Gemara, you could appreciate this was written. The same people had both conversations. They're just different types of conversations, so they wrote them in two books. There's a lot of parallel between the substance of the material. They're like a hand in a glove. It's like Chassidus and Nigla. Zohar and Shas work together like Kabbalah and Halacha work today. They look like they match. They look like they're written at the same time. So something could be in the Zohar, not in the Gemara, because it's part of the Zoharic half of the discourse, of the conversation, the discussion. But Halacha is law. And Baruch Shem Yishtabach are brachas. They belong in the law also. And the fact that they're not is a question. Okay? So what we just explored was the bracha of Baruch Shem versus Psukkah Dezimra, and I basically gave you the three opinions. Okay? Does anybody wish to speak or comment?
That's right, but so we drop before the 10th line.
You could interrupt before that line, like you would interrupt in the middle of Psukkah Dezimra itself. You shouldn't say Baruch Hu Baruch Shmai, but you can answer everything else. If the Kaddish, there's something called Chatzi Kaddish, which has 5 Amens according to our custom. The Amens after the 5 Kaddish, like Tiskabel and Oyser Shalom, you wouldn't answer. But besides for those two things, the Psukkah Dezimra will answer everything. Once you start the Bracha of Baruch Hamishtabach, this is also a machlokes. There are opinions that hold that the Bracha of the Psukkah Dezimra are restricted at the Birkat Kishma, which is a later and a more serious stage in davening. Okay, you look in the back of the book; it's got to read all the rules. If you thought Judaism was technical, welcome to the back of the Siddur. And you know what? You read all these rules, you still have 50 questions. What about this? There's a lot of things that are not there. As detailed as it is, there's more detail. So it's 12 o'clock. If I give you a break, this class is not going to continue. So should I continue? Should I break? How long a break do you want?
I think that.
You have 100 seconds.
So generous.
That's a minute and 40.
Okay, it was not boring.
Thank you. Well, my daughter said for it. She had to pay for it. Otherwise, she wouldn't be my daughter.
Teach your daughter in base workshop?
Yeah, in seminary.
Wow.
It's good I'm teaching her. You know why? Because if I wasn't teaching her, I'd quit. It says that we subscribe $119, but then it also says status, no subscription. Another contradiction. On the top it says subscription active, on the bottom it says no subscription. Okay. Okay, it's more than 140 seconds. A lady in Israel said 100 seconds? Question mark, question mark. Okay, here we go. Yeah, this class is online. That's why I have these two phones. Why? Yeah, well, they complain. What do you do? Okay, girls, I have about 12, 13 minutes left. We go to a quarter after 20 after. 20 after. I want to read Baruch Shama inside. Our version. Does everybody have one? Now, last year, I gave you a bunch of classes on Baruch Shama. I don't remember how many. But I did this. In other words, what I'm doing, I'm starting the year over and I'm repeating a lot of things I said last year because I feel that this is the right thing to do. I can't just walk in here and say, okay, I'm in the middle of a story, here's the rest of it. I need to bring you in. And that's what I did last week, and that's what I'm doing this week. I'm hoping next week at least, I will have brought you to the space that we were, and it's not going to take 6 Wednesdays, as we did last year, I think, or 5 Wednesdays, and we'll continue where we're holding. So what I want to do for the remaining time is read and translate Baruch Shama. I'm gonna be direct. I'm just reading and translating, but I'm not just reading and translating. I'm reading and translating and telling you how I understand Baruch Shama. I daven every day. Yeah, imagine that. And I say the words. And sometimes I think about them. And I've been doing it for a very long time, for at least 50 years. It's a very long time. So I have my own feelings about Baruch Shama. In other words, not everything I think when I say Baruch Shama, I saw in a sefer. Much of it is, I say, on the book of my heart, my own personal feeling about Baruch Shama. And that's what I'm going to share with you. I'm going to read it and translate it, and I'm going to explain it. Okay? I'm just going to say one short thought as a segue, and then I'm going to read. There is another whole big discussion about the whole of Sukkot is in there. And that discussion is as follows. Everybody agrees that the theme of the Psukkei de Zimra is creation. The theme of Psukkei de Zimra is thanking Hashem for creating the world, creation. Creation, biblically, creation in the Torah comes down to what's called in the Mishnah, Asara Ma'amoros, the 10 utterances. Hashem created the world with 10 utterances. There's a bunch of opinion of what the 10 utterances are, but everybody agrees that there's 10 of them. So part of the design of the Psukkei de Zimra is to reflect creation. But most of the Psukkei de Zimra is to reflect creation. Many people hold that not only is Psukkei de Zimra as a whole reflecting creation and the so-called 10 utterances, but that in Baruch Sha'amar itself, you have the 10 utterances represented. There are opinions who hold that in Baruch Sha'amar you have 10 Baruchs. How many Baruchs we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And then the 2 brachas. You have 13 if you count them all. There are opinions who hold that there's 10 baruchs in Baruch Sha'amar, and you can make a good case that it means the 10 baruchs besides for the bracha, but Baruch Hashem the beginning and the end. We've got 13, so there'll be 11 plus 2. And that the reason you have 10 baruchs is parallel to 10 utterances of creation. And I'm working now on this part of the classes to present that to you. I'm going to give you that version of Baruch Sha'amar. One of the things I want to teach you is the version of Baruch Sha'amar that connects it to the creation account. Then there's an argument about something else. And that is the question, is Zeichel L'Mais Yetzias Mitzrayim also part of Psukkei? Is the Exodus a part of Psukkei de Zimra? The Rambam holds, for example, he's not the only one who holds this, that Psukkei de Zimra only speaks about creation. And the Rambam's opinion is that when you finish Psukkei de Zimra, you say Yishtabach, and then you sing Oz Yoshir. Then you sing the song with to do with the Exodus. And after you finish Oz Yoshir, then you start Birchas Kishma. But according to the Rambam, there's actually a space between Psukei de Zimra and Birchas Kishma where you think about the Exodus, because according to the Rambam, Psukei de Zimra is only about creation. The Exodus is considered a higher level. We obviously disagree with that. The Rambam, and it's not just the Rambam, it's a lot of Rishonim. We include in the Psukei de Zimra from the middle of the Vayivarach David, Yosha, and then Yishtab, and Ad Yashir, the Exodus. So one of the many different discussions that you have Psukei de Zimra is what are we praising Hashem for? Everybody agrees we're praising Hashem for the creation of the world, and some hold that included that also as the giving us the freedom that we have as Jews when it's connected to the Exodus. So Baruch Sha'amar, at the very least, is a segue into creation, and it explains all the Baruchs. Because there's one Baruch for each origin of creation. It says in the most important book ever written on Siddur, called Abu Draham, Rabbi Abu Draham, his book is actually translated into English. That's about 700 years old. It's the go-to book on Siddur if you're an expert. If you're not an expert, it's going to blow your mind. But he says that each Baruch corresponds to one of the utterances of the creation. He has different Baruchs. His Nusach is like the Rambam's. He has many things that we don't say at all, but that's part of his account. Okay, now let's read. Baruch Sha'amar, blessed is he who Amar, listen to me carefully, okay? Who thought. V'haya ha'olam, and the world came into being by itself. Amira, Aleph Mem Reish, very often means to speak. In fact, in most cases it means to speak. But in this case, it says in Kabbalah, it says nothing but a Siddur. Amira means to think. But blessed is he who thought and everything came into being. Now you must understand the philosophy of that. Not only did the Eibush not have a mouth, which is used for speech, the Eibush doesn't even have a brain, which is used for thought. It doesn't make him dumb. That makes him the Eibush. Understand? So whenever we use anthropomorphic form, when we describe the Eibush as doing things like people, you have to give a philosophical understanding of what it means. When you describe creation and you say the Eibush created the world through speech, what does it mean? When a person speaks, the air comes out of their mouth and goes out into the environment. When Hashem spoke and he created the world, he made the world separate from himself. But then we say, before he spoke, he thunk, he thought. And when the Eibush thought, he also created the world. But just like when a person thinks, the creation remains one with the thinker, with the creator. Similarly, when the Eibush created the world on a level of thought, the world remained one with him. Or to say it in the language of the Mishnah, it says in Chassidus that before the Eibush spoke the 10 utterances, there is the Maimer Echad, there's one utterance. That one utterance is considered thought. That's the meaning of these words. Baruch Sha'amar, blessed he, that the whole reality came into being on a level of thought from one Amira. And Vahoya is passive. It's not active. He didn't create the world. He thought about it and it happened by itself. And then we say, Baruch Hu, blessed be he. The word he means the unknown figure. Him. Who's him? I don't know who him is. So when you talk about the Eibush that created the world on a level of thought, we refer to him as him in third person, the unknown. You understand? The opposite of him is I, or at least you. I is first person, you is second person, him is third person. When we describe the Eibush that creating the world, the way the world is part of his thoughts, the Eibush and his creation is so far away from our reality that we describe him as being over there, him. And just to tell you a little Lashon Hara, when I was a kid growing up, I called my mother, as I still do, Lariches Tom B'Shanim Tevis, Mommy. And I called my father, Tati. That's how we refer to them. Now, when I talked to my mother about my father, I called him Tati. When I talked to my father about my mother, I called him Mommy. Now, what happened if both parents were in the room? So you'd say, Mommy, Tati, or Ma, Ta, whatever the thing. When I was upset at my mother, I would call her she. And my father would scream, "Who's she?" That was the end of the conversation. It happened more than once. It happened more than twice. Who's she? Like, how dare you? Mommy is she? Because I was saying she, because I was upset with her, you understand? Who is she? Mommy. Want to talk about your mother? It's mommy, it's not she. Now here we're calling the Abish he. But we're not calling him he because we're upset with him. We're calling him he because he's so far away. And let's continue. And Baruch Sha'arma, the Abish that thought the whole world came into being, but that world and the Abish that created that world is identified as being far away from us, him, because it's the unknown. Then we continue. Baruch Oimer v'yis. Blessed is he who thought and then acted. Meaning the world did not remain Kayachol, the Abish that thought, but after the Abish that thought, he proactively created the world, and we call it Asiya, we call it an action, but in the Chazal it's written that Hashem does not have action. Hashem has what's called speech, and after that Hashem has a level which is called the Budesh al HaKadosh Baruch Hu Chashiv Maaseh, the words of Hashem which are considered speech. We have thought, speech, and action. Hashem has thought, speech, and speech. And I'll tell you why. When you think, the thought and the person are one. When you speak, the speech and the person are two, but the air came from inside the person. When you act, you take something from the world and you attach your ideas to it. Take a rock and another rock and you put it next to each other. You put another one on top of it, you have the beginning of a wall. So the distinction of speech is that something that was inside of me comes out of me. The distinction of action means something that's inside of me connects to something outside of me to create the gestalt, everything in the world, yeah? There's nothing outside of God. Hashem cannot go to the appliance store or to the hardware store or to the men's store and buy material. The material is him. And therefore, by the Eibishter, the idea that he acts is really another level of speech. Because the chomer, the material with which he creates, is also a part of him, as opposed to us. And only means he thinks, and he acts. He creates the world, and the world is going to be separated from him. Baruch Goizer Umakaya. The questions will have to be. Baruch Goizer, the Eibishter separates and preserves. Goizer means to decree or to declare, but Goizer means to cut. Umakayim and to preserve. What this means is the Eibishter separates himself in the world. We call that in fancy tzimtzum. Hashem takes himself away and leaves the world over. If the Eibishter goes away and leaves the world over, you have to say Makayim, even though the Eibishter Kayachim separates himself from the world, he keeps it. Boys that he cuts, he separates, or Makayim, and he preserves the world. Baruch Oisevereshis. After the Eibishter creates the world in thought and creates the world in speech, and separates himself to leave a space for the creation, he launches the creation into existence. I don't have time to explain this to you at length, but the basic idea is, first the world was one with the Eibishter. Then the Eibishter removes himself and leaves the world over. And then he has to push the world into being a world. And that's Eiseh V'Reishis. The Eibishter removes himself, goes into Makayim, and then the world which he leaves over in that space, he forces into being. This is called Yislapshus Keach Apel Benifel. And Hashem invests himself in the creation. Or Diburesh al HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hashem Maaseh. These are fancy ideas, but the ideas are very simple. The Baruch Shama is describing the process of creation step by step. And the Baruch Eiseh V'Reishis means that after Hashem removes himself and leaves over a space, and in this space leaves over a world, he reinvests himself in the world to make the world be a world. Then it says twice Rachmanis, right? Baruch Merachim ala Oretz, Baruch Merachim ala Brias. What does this mean? This means that it says in the first pasuk in Chumash, Rashi, when the Eibishter created the world, he created the world with a lot of gevura, with a lot of dinim, with a lot of exactitude, a lot of judgment, a lot of strength. And the Eibishter saw that a world that's created with a lot of Buddha would not last. So he softened the Gevura with Rachamim. Shitev, Ime, he softened. If you look in the creation account in Genesis, right, it says, Bereshit bara Elokim. V'yemer Elokim. V'yemer Elokim. The creation is done through Shem Elokim. Elokim means dinim. It isn't till Genesis chapter 2 that the name Hashem appears. V'yemer says Hashem Elokim and Veshmai. And the Rashi says, the Medrash tells us, when Hashem created the world, he wanted to create an extremely severe world, an exact world. So that he's going to hide a lot, and he's going to expect us to work very hard and find him. And then the Eibishter figured out that we're just not going to find him. So we had to sweeten him. And he added Rachamim. And that's what these two things are. Merachim, our audits, after the Eibishter created the world. And creating the world means he separated himself from the world. He then had mercy on his world. He put some of himself back into his world, and we call this the idea of miracles and the presence of tzaddikim, so that we should actually find him. If Hashem hides the way he's able to hide, we'll never find him. So the Goyzer Kayim and the Oysev Ereshet connotes how Hashem creates the world where he's hidden from it. And the Merachim Ala Oretz, Hashem has mercy on the earth. And Merachim Abiyas has mercy on the creations. Hashem is sweetening his world. It should be easier for us to see it and to find it. Now it says twice Rachamim. First Rachamim was on the whole creation. The second Rachamim was on the living creatures within the creation. In other words, Hashem put a softness into all of the creation, but he's put a specific softness into those creations that are able to find them, which really means people. Then it says, Baruch Mishalem Sochar Tevireh. Blessed be he who gives good reward to those who fear him. The connotation of these words is that not only did Hashem create the world, not only did Hashem preserve the world, but what we do is important to him. He gives us reward for what we do. But the real meaning of the reward that the Eibishter gives us for what we do is the very fact that what we do, he values. That's the meaning of these words. Mishalem Sochar, those who do the right thing, Hashem reward. Reward means not to give the pizza. Years ago in Bachan, I used to say pizza with extra cheese, but I wanted to talk about reward. He gives us that what we did is important to him. But then it's something even crazier. Baruch Heide Umatzah. Blessed be he who redeems and saves. You know what this is about? This is about the Baal Tshuva. If we did the wrong thing, we made mistakes. The Eibishter cares so much about his creation. He cares so much about human beings. He cares so much about Yidden that even those of us who stink it up, he finds a way to fix it. He redeems and he saves. So we said a bunch of baruchs. And in these baruchs, we're describing an evolution of creation that not only speaks about the process of the creation, it speaks about the value that Hashem, Kvayochel, finds in creation, even to the sinners. And then we say, what's the next two words? Somebody tell me. Who's listening? Time to go to lunch. I'll get the message. Baruch Shmoi, blessed be his name. Now, after Baruch, we said Baruch who? Him. Why? Because Hashem himself is unknown. The name of Hashem means the godliness, which is a little closer to us. And all these things, they're not coming from the Eibishter himself. They're coming from the Eibishter's name, from godliness as opposed to from God, which is a lower level. So all of these baruch are describing the event of creation and the place creation has, so to speak, in the reality of Elokus, to the extent that he values those who fear him, that means the tzaddikim, and he even values those who he has to save, which means the Bali Tshuva. And then the bracha begins. But I got the hint, even though I'm a man, I'll do this next week. Okay, I have a wedding on Monday night. I'm Hashem. My son is getting married. If he can come in and say, "L'chaim," if you know Teda, we wonderful. Monday night, 9:30 is Simcha Chos Makala. Baruch Hashem. So Wednesday, I probably don't have a good excuse for not being here, but I may come on with him. But okay. Okay, good afternoon. I was hoping to finish it, but okay, doesn't matter. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. Hazak, hazak. I'll tell my daughter he said I wasn't boring. She's gonna kill me for saying what she said, so I won't tell. I won't tell.
Which daughter?
Nah. The daughter that's in Bishifta this year.
Now you told us.
Yes, now I told. Oh,
Wait, you just deafened everyone on Zoom.
no, I turned it off. I have a first cousin who's a bit older than me. And I respect him enormously. He's very, very intelligent. He's a big Talmud Chacham. He's a retired businessman who became a yeshiva Rebbe, teaching Gemara to boys. And he, every once in a while, he'll listen to one of my classes and he'll respond. When he listens to my classes, first of all, I get nervous because if I make a mistake, he'll correct me. And second of all, I don't consider myself worthy to be his teacher. He should be my teacher. I respect him a lot. He's just 1 year older than I, but he's very, very intelligent. He came across a little clip that I did on marriage, I guess, parenting. And one of the things I said in that 10-minute clip is that the two most difficult things you'll ever do in your life, nobody teaches you how to do, which is how to be married and then have children, and raise children. And my argument is, you learn that you only have one. The classroom for learning how to be a wife or a husband is the home you grew up in. The classroom to learn how to be a parent is the home you grew up in. There's two ways classes teach. Either they teach you should do this, or you do exactly the opposite of this. And I always say what I personally believe. I believe this. I think the hardest thing a person does in his life is be married. Like, I think it's harder to be married to a person of the opposite gender than to raise kids. A man and a woman are not a natural fit. They're incredibly natural fit, but you almost want to work. So they're very different. So my cousin sent me a message this morning. I found marriage pleasant and easy, and I found child rearing impossible. So I mentioned my daughter, so I thought of that. Because raising kids is a trip. And being married is a trip too. Okay, it's worth it. It's worth it. Okay, I gotta get out of here, right? I still have some poison left.
You had a clip where you said, I think based on the girls about, in a few years, they're gonna be making a decision that you're not involved.
Right,
Which is
True.
so fast.
true.
It's so crazy.
You know the reason is? Because when you're 50, you'd never decide to go through with it.
Really? Oh my gosh.
What about the
I
people?
Fabring with married men with kids. So this Tal Fabring was, thank God he was. Yeah, two choice. Everybody, the best thing that ever happened to a person is be married. It's just difficult.
Okay.
Difficult means you have to learn how to do it. Men and women are so deeply different. As much as the world tries to say that it's nurture and nature, there's things about your husband that you can't do. And he's not gonna know what to do. And there's things about you that you grab your husband up and he doesn't know what to do. And yet, you figure it out. It takes a very long time. It's like a year. And over the course of your marriage, if him and her care about it and they work, the bond between husband and wife, it's there's nothing like it. The love between husband and wife is so deep. It's so deep. There's nothing close to it. So I'm not saying it's bad. It's just a challenge. So you can run away from it, or you can embrace it. And Yiddishkeit said you must embrace. And if you do, and you know, you can't do it by yourself. Neither of you are perfect. You will fight with your husband. I can tell you right now. But you'll make up.
I am to please.
Okay, sorry. That was when I was serious.
It's theory, Rabbi.
Whatever. And that's our philosophy of living. You know, you could stay single, make a lot of money, and eat in the nicest restaurants, and make the best foods and run the best vacations, and have a very pleasurable life. And it does not go on. And the saddest part of it is you mean that it's real like our culture, which is a very religious culture, it's an intensely religious culture. We, huh?
Since when?
Since when what? Right, doesn't give you a chance to even think about the alternative. Marry a can't marry the woman they can't get married because they're married for work. But guys and girls get married and then after a few years, how did I get into this? But then they figure it out. And we have a quality of life. It's not, it's religion for the age that wants. I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying it's hard. And it is.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I said to my cousin, my cousin struggles with his children. I also struggle with my children. My cousin really struggles with children. I said, it may be true that we were more successful in our marriage than with our children, but we really worked very hard. Every couple works very hard in their marriage. I mean, my cousin has a different temperament than I do, so it may be easier to be married as me to be married. But you work very hard. He hasn't responded yet. He wrote his note and I answered him and he hasn't responded to that response. Okay, I'll see you in a week.
We know there's the old adults that something worth having, you know, what is it?
Anything worth having, you have to work for. It's a fact of life. You know, this class probably didn't even go on the internet. I was supposed to push a button, I didn't push it. I don't know who's in charge, but you know. Okay, I'll see you. Yes. Yes, ma'am. I saw you on the streets.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
found my phone.
For a question.
If I have a question here, fine. Should I ask this like beginning of next class?
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Please do, yeah.
We should know at my note, one time a woman left and she asked the Rabbi if anyone teaches like him.
No.
He said no, and they said, if you really want, Rabbi paltiel, sort of similar to my style.
Say that again?
Rabbi Kaufman, someone asked Rabbi Kaufman at Mino if anyone teaches like him. Actually, it was reading Mino. She wanted a class or something like his. And he said, no one teaches like me. And then he said, if you're really looking, Rabbi paltiel teaches similar to my style.
Thank you. My daughter sent me regards to him too.
Oh, yeah?